Now, this feels like something we have to talk about again, and it is the usage of fullbacks, and it is how he set up against Fulham and how the game changed in the second half. And we're going to speak about a few of those different things with a few images from the games to sort of speak about Reece James, Malo Gusto, Mark Cucurella, and how they sort of affect the games and the game state and how much control we have in the game, the sort of emphasis and almost the pace of the game, because I think that's something that a lot of people have an issue with at the minute. And I think a big thing to sort of take a step into with that is that let's start with Reece James and the usage of him. And I think this is something I've touched on in a solo video where I spoke about Reece as a midfielder. I think the intensity that he can play out right now is just it's nullified. It's at a certain range, right? And I think in this role, even his interpretation of this role, it's very sort of shorter distance. He will make those sprints when it's needed out of possession, sort of side to side, even just to sort of apply pressure when needed going forwards. But it's not as much on him, on his body, okay, as it would have been in the right back role, going up and down, or even if he was sort of as a box to box midfielder at all times and all action, and he was like driving through the middle of the pitch 100 miles an hour and doing everything at full capacity. It does feel very much protective of Reece to keep him in the game. I mean, when he was in that first half, we saw a lot of really nice sort of, he was dropping into these areas really deep, receiving the ball, and he was actually looking to play those crossfield balls because we know the technical ability of Reece James is not an issue. We know that if we're high up the pitch and we can get the ball to him in and around here, he has the ability to put those balls into the box. He can play those balls over the top from here, and this is something he did. Not only sort of switches, but he also tried a few of them into this area of the pitch as well. I think it kickstarted one of our sort of best attacks in the first half. So this is something he can do. He's willing to drop in, very press resistant in like sort of his build and his frame. He can receive the ball here. But it's worth touching on, of course. The goal that we conceded against Fulham did actually come from him not being aware. So the sort of other side of it, in this position, sort of strolling out, and the ball gets nicked, and Fulham go and attack and they score. So that's another side of it that, again, for Reece as a player, that a lot of people will lazily just sort of pin it and like, oh, Reece doesn't look himself, he's not enjoying the role, and all these things, which I think purely if you was to get the best out of Reece every single week and there was nothing holding him back, sure, then maybe he even knows himself that the best version of him isn't this. The best version of him was if you could make him do this 38 games a season, up, down, under Tuchel, right wing back, arriving, scoring goals, putting crosses into the box. Unbelievable on his day. Unbelievable when he's fit, but that's a big if. Now, in the first half, because of that, what you often see is a little bit more of a gap between sort of this box out of possession, but also on the ball, sorry, when pushing up and squeezing up. So when these players sort of attack this last line and you create that last line of five, and they're all attacking sort of, oh, that's a terrible arrow, but they're all going into these areas and they're all trying to attack that last line. Oh, not that. These two will naturally press up, but the pace in which they do it is slightly different. And the pace of which, again, the runs that they could make, because James from here could, again, he's meant to sort of, the idea is that these two are there to block play out. So if the ball is lost, long ball comes over, these two are trying to sort of stop that so they can then recycle, go again, keep pushing. And they're also passing angles, they're options. But it's the intensity of how they go up and down at these levels. And what we could see from Reece, and I'll show you a few examples now.
Reece's instincts were to go deeper rather than to follow the play, even when the likes of Enzo and Palmer did drop in to receive the ball. The intensity of his movement often led to a larger distance in this triangle between the three, leaving Palmer and Madueke often isolated with Reece not in position to help with the counter press.
So as you can see from those, a lot of the time, these would be a little bit more stretched because, again, James, he's not trying to use that full intensity. He's not making those bursting runs at all times because, again, he's trying to prolong himself. He's trying to keep himself fit. He's trying to stay in for the run-in. He's trying to be important for the squad, not just for a game. So what you can then see is a little bit more of a gap to emerge. And if the ball is lost between, let's say, Palmer and Madueke, like we showed, there's a little bit more space for teams to exploit in there, which can then leave James in a position. Does he actually apply the pressure? Does he back off? And you maybe don't have that tenacity in there to gain what you want to gain from that. However, when you put Gusto in here, and this is something I've been saying all season, and Maresca alluded to it with the dynamism quotes about Gusto. Now, in the second half, what we actually saw more of was more of a two at the back because we had to go for it a bit. being 1-0 down. And then we actually saw more of these two both attacking the half spaces. And again, Enzo and Palmer actually swapped round. Enzo was dropping in because Gusto came on. And again, this is something we've seen with these two, that there's a little bit of something forming there. We saw it a few games ago. I spoke about it. We're starting to see a few more automized sort of rotations between these guys where Enzo drops in, he gets into that deeper position. Gusto can attack that space. He's willing to run. He's got the athleticism, the engine, and all of those things that help. And I do think that those two on that side does help towards that dynamism that he keeps talking about. And again, I'm going to quickly show you a few differences with the Nets now with Gusto in the second half than with James in the first half, and the distances and things like that.
The mobility of Gusto really helped to make those distances much tighter when that right-sided triangle pushed forward as a unit. And it was the aggression and tenacity with the positioning of Gusto and Cucurella in this counter-pressing net that led to Chelsea sustaining better possession in that second half, eventually leading to Tyreek Jaw's equaliser with the snapshot. The aggressive positioning of both half-space players being Malo Gusto and Marc Cucurella was absolutely pivotal in this moment.
So as you can see, with those distances, Gusto and Cucurella, they were keeping these half spaces so compactly, sort of every time that ball broke in there, whether Palmer and Enzo, wherever they were on the pitch, whether they drifted a bit wider to get on the ball, whether Enzo was deeper, whether Palmer was sort of central or, again, attacking the box, Cucurella and Gusto with their advanced positioning, and again, Casado, even Colwell and Chalobah, sort of as that three there to just back it up, being very aggressive off the ball. But having both of these players bounding into those positions and winning those ball recoveries, winning those duels to keep sustained pressure, it was just so important to keep going with those goals. And we saw it with the examples. For the George goal, both Cucurella and Gusto, they're occupying those zones because, and it's not only forcing Fulham backwards, but it's also meaning that they can't break out and they don't really have an outlet. They don't have a ball to give them a little bit of like pressure relief. And therefore Chelsea keeps sustaining, and eventually the goals come through it. So, does this mean Gusto, all of a sudden, you just scratch everything off and you say he's been okay this season? Obviously, no. There has been parts of this season, a lot of this season, where a lot of his actions, and this is how I'm trying to sort of relate it to other people, I think Gusto has had a very poor season based on his action output. What I mean by that is his passing has been very astray at points. Yes, he's under a bit more pressure in the middle of the park, so you don't get it's not as easy. He's obviously still adapting to that, but he did play as a central midfielder for Lyon in their academy days. He has that experience. It's not like completely new to him. Some of his crosses have been very astray. Again, not in those positions as much. The rhythm maybe not there. So a lot of his actions not been up to scratch this season as much as they were last season, and you can see sort of the drop off there. However, in terms of intensity, in terms of his pressing, and this is why I like having him central, and I keep saying it, same with Cucurella, I love having players that from this position can be really aggressive, win the ball back there, and then we can sustain attacks and actually create those moments of chaos that everybody wants to see, because we're playing slow around the back, which, yeah, a lot of people are frustrated with, but that's why the counter press is so important, because that's where the pace comes from. That's where the injected pace is, because you've then set up a net. The point of playing slow is so that you all progress as one, and actually your attacks or your chaotic moments don't come from those sort of circulatory moments. It actually comes when you lose the ball or you try a long ball, say from Chalobah into Enzo. That ball breaks, and instead of losing the ball and having to transition 50, 60 yards back the pitch, you've got someone really close proximity, wins the ball back, and you can attack a back line that isn't set. That's why I like the likes of Gusto and Cucurella in there, and I think that is why I really do like the idea of Gusto playing as an inverted player, because I think he has that skill set, and I also think he's technically secure enough that if he improves next season and gets out of this little rut of form in terms of performance-based and those sort of action-based sides of the game, then I think that he can really do a lot of damage in this role. And I actually want to see him more, which again, a lot of people won't agree with. I want to see him in that number 10 role again. And that's why I like what they're doing with Enzo, because it doesn't mean that he's stuck there and receiving with his back to play, because again, that doesn't suit him. But what does suit him is when Enzo drops in, if he can continue that run and he can use those legs to make the underlapping run, he can go on the outside of Madueke here. And it just adds that little bit of dynamism, which is the perfect word that Maresca used, to the team using Gusto in that way. Would love to see Acheampong used in that way too. And of course, if eventually you can let Reece off the leash in that sense, absolutely do it. However, we don't really know that. So I think for at least the rest of this season, it would be unwise to suggest that we were to do that, unless maybe sort of last day of the season against Forest, because you go. But again, the Club World Cup's there, so who knows? Let me know your thoughts on this down in the comments. Any questions, I'll try and get to them. And we'll be back on Friday. So this is a Wednesday upload. We'll be back on Friday with a Dean Huijsen to Chelsea video. So do not miss that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.